or both of them are from the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, University of Western Cape, South Africa. Ruth holds the South African Research Chair in Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. She has published several books, including Africa's Land Rush, Global Land Grabbing, and Political Reactions from Below, another Countryside, and another book on land question in South Africa. She is the co-founder of the Land Geopolitics Initiative, the BRICS Initiative in Critical Agrarian Studies, and Emancipation or Emancipatory Rural Politics Initiative. She is a founding member of the Network of Excellence in Land Governance in Africa and leads training courses for policymakers and professionals on the political economy of land governance in Africa. And she is also served sometimes back as a member of the President Cecil Ramaphosa Advisory Panel on Land Reform, and she is an editor of the Journal of Peace and Studies. The colleague, Moenieba Isaacs, same institute, they work together. Moenieba Isaacs is a full professor with the Institute of Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, same institute with Ruth at the University of Western Cape. She is an academic manager for postgraduate studies, coordinator of accredited short courses training on the political economy of land governance in Africa and on convivial conservation. Her research focus currently is on developing the concept of blue justice, linking it to spatial injustice, the gender dynamics of women in living landscapes in and around enclosures in the blue economy. Kindly help me to welcome these ladies to give us their presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. We've made it to the end of Friday. Congratulations. And I think that Moenieba and I are both feeling so honored to be asked to be here. And we'd love to give a great thanks to the University of Nairobi for being such a fantastic host. Thank you very much, University of Nairobi. And also to the amazing organizing committee that have worked so incredibly hard, and all the tech people behind the scenes. What an amazing conference, very ambitious. Thank you. Instead of having an entirely privatized keynote, we are doing a co-keynote. We've decided we're decommodifying the keynote. So please bear with us. It's going to be a double act. Our theme today is Taking Back the Commons, Decommodification, Deconcentration and Democratization. The battle is on for Africa's commons, but not all is lost. Beyond the onslaught of corporate, elite, and state-backed land and resource grabbing that we see rampant across many parts of the continent, our talk today calls for more attention to the many spaces in which commons are not merely being defended, but claimed, produced, and created. Across urban and rural spaces, from land movements in inner cities, to illicit resource harvesting, illegal grazing, illegal fishing, art and theatre spaces, food solidarity networks. We proposed two meanings of the term taking back the commons, both literal and figurative. First, we're talking about the onward march of commoditization amidst crises of survival and social reproduction, financialization, labor precarity, and how these processes are spurring counter-movements as people claim or reclaim in either overtly political formations, but also sometimes more quietly, incrementally, individually, entitlements to natural resources and territory. The three prior keynotes this week have mapped out important dimensions of the conference themes. Mordecai spoke about mobility and resilience. Jesse talked about hazard analysis and disaster framing. And Milka talked about indigenous peoples' commons. And we're adding to these now a set of questions about ongoing struggles to create commons and the historical background to these struggles and the spaces in which these new commons are happening. And we're doing this with particular reference to the African commons and natural resources, but we hope that some of our comments will resonate across the context that you know. We're connecting particularly with theme 10 of the conference on radical futures for the commons, and we'll be picking up on some of the themes already discussed in many parts of the conference, like which kinds of ideas about property get naturalized? How do we think about existing conditions historically? How do we think about markets and the economy historically? How do we think about the task of the analyst and the scholar? And how do we recenter the social in social science? Now, I believe that I have a clicker, but I don't see it. So can I ask somebody to click the virtual clicker? Yes, we've got it. So not to be outdone by Jesse, we have to have a poem, right? And the poem that we have is probably one that is very well known to many of you. If you know it very well, you can say it along. But I understand that many people in this conference are here in this community for the first time. And so I'd love to share this with you. It's a 17th century folk poem that captures a critique of the enclosure movement in the British countryside, and how the commons were turned into private property. It does this by exposing the double standards about notions of property, and it does it with humor, jargon, and in rhyming couplets. The law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose off the common, but leaves the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. The law demands that we atone when we take things we do not own, but leaves the lords and ladies fine, who take things that are yours and mine. The poor and wretched don't escape if they conspire the law to break. This must be so, but they endure those who conspire to make the law. The law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, and geese will still a common lack till they go and steal it back. Can we go to the next slide? So, I want to focus now on this largely neglected but potent and portentous last rhyming couplet, which is actually about the stealing back of the commons. And in our title, we talk about taking it back, which is perhaps a different emphasis, one that emphasizes legitimacy. To think about taking back, we want to suggest a theoretical framing, drawing from Karl Polanyi's work in The Great Transformation, published in 1944, in which he argued that capitalism spurs the creation of fictitious commodities of land, labor, and money amid generalized market relations. And that in doing so, these market mechanisms generate intolerable risks, including the risk of demolition of society. He argues further that the idea of a self-adjusting market implied a stark utopia. Such an institution could not exist for any length of time without annihilating the human and natural substance of society. Inevitably, society took measures to protect itself. And so his argument of the measures that society takes to protect itself presents a dialectic of commodification on the one hand and the protective measures taken by society on the other, a dialectic of commodification and decommodification, or a double movement. And so what we want to focus on today is the double movement and the countervailing moves towards decommodification and creation of spaces outside of markets. In the midst of crises of livelihood and survival, and faced as we are now with the proliferation of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, increased labor redundancy and precarity, neoliberalized states shorn of the tools with which to protect citizens from the ravages and convulsions of markets for food, fuel, and finance. In this context, we see enclosure and commodification gathering pace, taking back the commons as a defense of society will be contested, often violently. Counter-movements to commodification are evident all around if we are willing to look, ranging from illicit self-help to incremental dismantling of property to solidarity or nested markets and agrarian movements. Commons, importantly, serve as a constraint on privilege. They are a social relation that is premised on denying oneself as much as others the option of privatizing and accumulating resources at the expense of the public. It is not a thing, but a practice that we build. And so we suggest that we should look at struggles for social reproduction, and struggles to create new commons as a form of resistance and as part of decommodification and part of a counter-movement. Where do we see such counter-movements happening? We'll talk through a number of examples, which Moenieba will share with you in a moment. But I want to just mention that it is in this era of unprecedented technological change, of mobility, of money, of mobility, of resources, of mobility of technologies, and strangely, the relative immobility of people that creates these crises. So in Africa, here we are after this period of land grabbing, a period particularly in the past 15 to 20 years of new enclosures that followed the food, fuel, and finance crises of 2007 and 2008. The world now has an enormous panoply of laws, guidelines, regulations on ethical management of land. Must I finish up, Moenieba? Yeah, okay. But even amidst all of this, what has slowed down the expansion of large-scale land deals and land grabs across Africa has not been this world of rights and good governance, but rather the kinds of changes in commodity prices. And this is why we see many of the big land deals across the continent in Sierra Leone and Ethiopia and Mozambique, some of these mega deals not being realized in practice. Another recent trend that we think is a form of commodification is the growth of digital platforms for land rights registration, the kinds of blockchain and cloud-based databases that are proliferating, often with major donor support across the continent. The irony, of course, is that many of these have been promoted in order to defend and support people to defend themselves against dispossession, but ironically constitute a form of commodification in themselves in many respects. I'm going to hand on to Moenieba to talk about, beyond the land grab of the past 15 years, what is the new kind of terrain of commodification that we see, and what are the kinds of responses to it?
Don't worry, she will come back.
I'll be back.
It's often, as a sidekick of Ruth to come in and give your talk. So, Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you very much for the invitation to do a two-tag of this keynote. So, what now, before you forget where Ruth left off? A second motivation in our view is that there's another and ongoing but less visible land and resource rush underway. And because it is primarily framed in terms of development, climate mitigation, sustainability, they proceed in a very gradual, subtle way, but with very harmful effects. Narratives of vacant land, idle land, terra nullius, which have echoed since colonial times and also throughout this conference, have been renewed in waves of climate financing that seeks and enlists territories to offset carbon emissions everywhere. Elsewhere, today, the framework of development agencies globally and the tune to which our governments on the continent are dancing is the Sustainable Development Goals. And here the narrative is one of the green economy on land and the blue economy at sea. Both fundamentally models of defending nature by commodifying it. Both are fundamentally about extending privatization of nature and the erosion of the commons through commodification. An example of this is the ocean for debt swaps that is happening and continue to happen, and there's a big appetite for low-income countries. Under the banner of blue bonds, establishing vast marine protected areas, and where? Along our coastlines. Large conservation organizations are claiming to buy up ocean space, and this is the basis of targeting low-income countries like to sell off their debt. An example of this is the case that is in many papers, academic papers around the world, and that is of the Seychelles. And now Fiji is the next government that are doing the same debt swaps. Conservation and the resurgence of fortress conservation is happening now with the AU states committing to the 30 by 30 target by 2030, of setting aside 30% of territorial area enclosed for conservation, both on land, oceans, coastal, and inland water. Whether we call it blue grabbing or green grabbing, and this was also a key theme throughout the conference, it is in the name of conservation that it continues to be a vector of dispossession and enclosure. The push to privatize must be understood within the historical and geopolitical context of economic injustices. And this we can clearly see with the structural adjustment programs that happened here in the 80s and 90s. Not again, more debt. We're signing more debt for our future. We recognize among and across our communities of African colors are often justified in the vilification of our governments. But we need also to understand how states themselves subject to the squeeze of African economies and societies to bend to external dictate to privatize themselves. In short, surely we need to understand that the wider structural underpinnings are driving the enclosure of the commons. Otherwise, we are dealing with the manifestation of a neo-colonial dynamics without adequately specifying the causes. Neoliberal governance has involved the state repositioning in relation to society after decades of struggle, taking in a form of state-centered advocacy. We see the shift from statism towards society, people reclaiming space. So if we go back to the great transformation of Paul Jani and the double movement elsewhere, the zeitgeist the defining of a spirit and a mood of particular period in history as shown us by ideas and beliefs of the time. This raises the view that the alternative to wholesale commodification and dependence on market is not in the state but in society itself. Our task then is to discover society and respond and hit back in terms of commodity. So, she's losing control, so now she's wanting to tell me I need to finish, but I'm not done yet. Keep on, Ruth, wait, please. Okay, she'll do a podium grabbing. Okay, so what do we want to explore when we're talking about a counter movement in terms of the blue and the green economy? Where do we see this? What forms does it take? What narratives? And what is the solidarity that we need to take back the commons? What are the varied forms of taking back the commons? I think she was tired of standing, so that is great. I can get her to sit down. Okay. Yeah. So what are the varied forms of taking back the commons? We note a range of cases and examples of new commons emerging as people push back to find spaces to survive amidst commodification. This includes not only the physical occupation or reoccupation, but also the erosion of the exclusivity of privatized rights in the commodified form. Here are a range of examples where people are either taking back the commons or creating a new decommodified spaces of life, often through forms of self-organization that is relatively invisible. So taking back of the commons comes in the form of illegal fishing, illegal grazing, cutting fences, illicit resource harvesting, occupations of peri-urban land for housing, cross-border trade, like my colleague Larato there are researching, squatting, occupation, repurposing empty building, poaching. It's part of taking back the commons. But it does sit uncomfortable with us if that is the form of illegality and criminal activities. Taking back of the commons can also mean seed banks in the face of seed laws, food sovereignty, taking back food systems and challenging the very idea of food as a commodity, occupying spaces for trading, flouting regulations, claiming the right of the city not only for housing but also for food production in open spaces, taking back solidarity in the form of social and economic commons. This could be in cooperatives, production, marketing, housing cooperatives, spaces for solidarity and self-governance. Social movements are moving towards self-governance. And what is the self-government where state is absent and repressive, where the state functions as privatized, where formal trappings of democracy like electoral and party politics doesn't help people in responding to repressive states. People are indeed responding to land grabs, including grabbing land and resources for themselves. We recognize that all of these examples may be marginal and otherwise commodified but urge that we should seek out sites where commons are being created, where the goose is either stealing that commons back or joining to find something new. Over to Ruth.
You're going to be clapping quite a bit. We're going to carry on for a while. So some conceptual distinctions then. We're suggesting that we should, as well as, not instead, as well as analysis that focuses on the functions and the threats to and the defense of the commons, we should step back and see where people are quietly taking back commons, sometimes loudly and collectively, sometimes quietly individually. But there are enormous variations, and we think that some distinctions are in order. The first is that decommodification, taking back the commons, does not necessarily imply equity. It does not necessarily imply deconcentration or greater redistribution or access. It also doesn't necessarily imply democratization. So we think that we should be looking at, critically and in solidarity, decommodification movements and thinking about the contexts in which these possibly redistribute and possibly democratize. Can we skip through 3 slides to the very last one? That one, thank you very much. One very provisional starting point we suggest, a modest starting point, is to start to look at the variations in occupation and tenure across, across forms of new commons as people create through self-help access to resources for themselves, not creating new commons. As you see on the top left, top right, there may be some collective forms of holding of resources and property, forms of deconcentration, but without actually changing how they are used. In other words, for instance, you might have individual occupation in collective informal settlements. Bottom left, forms of collective occupation and use, but with individual tenure. For instance, where individuals engage in illegal activities, but with collective agreements about how to do so. And on the bottom right, variety of new kinds of commons emerging as we see deconcentration happening in collective forms with collective management. So let's leave the slides. Thank you very much to the slides person, if we can just take that. So, with that, 5 questions that we think should be considered as we take forward this kind of work. The first is to think about where and under what circumstances do we see new commons? Where are people taking back and creating new commons? And we suggest that this is an empirical agenda for research. Secondly, to what degree are these new commons that are being created being driven by struggles for social reproduction, places for living and for a means to survive, rather than for production, for markets, for accumulation? Third, who's driving this? One observation we have is that movements towards new commons are highly differentiated and also profoundly gendered. And the gender relations both shape these commons and, in turn, commons reshape gender relations, generational relations too. Fourth, what does decommodification actually do in terms of its effects? Across Africa, in many contexts, urban life is made possible not through wage economies alone, but profoundly because of the spaces of commons in rural areas that provide sustenance, that provide for lifestyle, life cycles in extended families, the commons that people rely on for the reproduction of extended family and kinship and lineage systems. What happens when these commons are foreclosed? And what kinds of new commons do people in urban areas without a rural home then create? Well, how does this change connections between rural and urban life? And the last of the 5 questions, to what degree are underlying politics expressed, and are these framed as acts of resistance? And if so, where are the spaces where these acts of resistance and new commons coalesce and even join forces? So with that, we're going to move towards wrapping up with our second set of questions, which is about taking back the commons in scholarship in ways that we think could be important in the future. And we want to discuss a notion of scholar activism in relation to the commons and illustrate how we understand and interpret the possibilities of enlisting African scholars and allies from around the world in forms of solidarity with taking back the commons. And this is, going back to the goose for the last time, a reflection on the fact that in many depoliticizing narratives of development, the focus falls on the dispossessed and the resourced, and the resource itself, and not on perpetrators, and not on beneficiaries of commodification. So, if in solidarity with decommodification movements, scholars will need to engage with and confront those interests, both local, proximate, and distant, whether a neighbor, a chief, a business person, a state institution, a conservation authority, a bank, a transnational agribusiness, or a mining corporation. Those interests that directly benefit through sustained commodification. So in our view, research can't be disconnected from solidarity. It's a messy world out there of legality and illegality together. And I think, Moenieba, you're going to say something now?
She thinks that she's allowing me to say something. As she said, it is a messy world when we talk about legality and illegality. And as Federici notes, commons are not necessarily places of equality and harmony. As self-governance sites and systems, though they present a defense against external exploitation, extradition of land, labor, and capital. Firstly, because commodification carries the weight of the law. Reclaiming the commons produce new commons, often by the definition in the realm of criminality. I think that as researchers, we shouldn't romanticize commons and look at what is the crisis communities face when we have multiple crises. What makes something legal often means that it has been commodified. Distributive illegality and corruption and rightfully illegal is some of the work that I've done in fisheries in South Africa on the abalone poaching. You find a community living next to a rich resource, a resource that is well sought after in the East, and they're not allowed to catch it. They don't have the rights. So you also find through that system of not allowing people to have their rights, they have established over 3 decades a system of criminalized livelihoods. And through that, it's also gendered, where women use their social reproductive role of caring, of cleaning the wetsuits of the poachers, of providing food, and these are all forms of income. In extending that work on criminality, I wrote a paper with a colleague, Emma Witboy, where we really try to kind of unpack the paradigm of crime. Can we in fisheries separate the crime from a fisheries management regulation? Because often when small-scale fishers are being caught with extra in the basket, they are often victimized, the gear confiscated, and they are imprisoned and fined. So in part of that work, going back into the apartheid regime, there were many fishers who were not given rights, and they used poaching as a form of protest against the system. So it is important that can we see that? Are we comfortable as researchers to see that as form of reclaiming the commons? I've leaned heavily on the work of Scott's Weapons of the Week and Kerkvliet's everyday form of peasant resistance, to look at what is the agency from below, what is the countercurrent to commodification, and therefore need to distinguish between decommodification as something which happens. Decommodification from above, we can call it policy reform. Decommodification from below, we need to look at this distributive politics and agency in a world where there is very messy politics. So how do we make sense of agency, even when it's illegal, violent, unequal, enacted by those whose ideologies and practices may not accord with the philosophies of commoning that hold us dear?
Right, so then what we're suggesting is let us, and we would like to do more research on counterexamples to look not at what is being commodified, but what's being re-socialized. What are the spaces in which a new world, contending with one that is already existing, is coming into being? In an era in which our attention itself has been commodified in the form of algorithms, we should give our attention, at least in part, to counter-movements, their material enactments and their organizational forms, what they make possible, but also their claims of legitimacy. They demand not only our support and solidarity, but also our attention. For this reason, we think also that scholarship on the commons needs to be increasingly multi-scalar. Analysis needs to push beyond, in our view, micro-scale analysis and action, and that while the local and the granular detail of particular struggles, particular people, particular resources is foundational for understanding the commons, it is not enough by itself. And so we call for multi-scalar research in which at least some of the activist and scholar attention is pushed upwards, beyond localism, to understand power, capital, policy, and at multiple scales. So increasingly, I think, Moenieba, you want to finish up with talking perhaps about examples of scholar activism?
You can stay here.
Okay.
I'll allow her to stay here now. Take your phone too. When we look at what are the implications for scholars and maybe what are the examples, we can look at what is the idea, the argument, and the conception. And some of the examples from our own research institute, the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, one of the most awesome institutes to work at, a little bit of promo for us. And what we've been doing over the years, we are now almost 20, Ruth, how old are we on the 1st of July?
28.
28 years. So we have really looked at participatory action research methods. We looked at using our scholarship to support social movements, political education campaign, producing plain language resources for the use of mobilization, writing many affidavits and otherwise supporting legal challenges, whether it is seismic surveys around the coast of South Africa, east and west, taking away a nutritious snook like from the mouths and poor people of South Africa. That is what we do. Being present and learning through struggles, using positionality to open doors and also create spaces where voices can speak to power directly. A typical challenge is the problems that we encountered and that add on decommodifying in academia. What are the risks and what are the risks and what are we willing to risk?
So finally, our thinking is that our research has to feed into practical change in the world, but also we need to rethink and change and challenge our curricula, and even model the behavior of the commons in our neoliberalized universities and push back wherever we can against this transactional model of clients and service providers in academia. We think that also the role of social scientists across the disciplines is to take our place collectively in challenging the damaging economism that dominates the development world. So in our input now, you may have noticed that perhaps there's been a subtle but significant shift from the conference title, which is the commons we want. Instead, we're focusing not on the commons we want, but the commons that people are making anyway. And we retain the thematic focus on this alternative futures. Perhaps the issue is rather not what we want as decision makers, but rather as scholars, we have an opportunity, the privilege and the responsibility to stand in solidarity, and sometimes critical solidarity, which can be uncomfortable, with those who are struggling not only to defend, but to create commons as an expression of another, kinder world. In short, to re-enchant the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give them another one. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Taking back the commons. So they have been taken. Thank you very much for your patience. In the interest of time, I would suggest, let me consult the chair so that we, do you have time? Yeah, even one question? Just, yeah, okay. So let's do it this way. One question here, another one here, another one. Maybe just one or two, please, okay? Yeah. In the interest of time, please. Roving mic. Here. Question here. Over there.
Thank you for this great, inspiring talk. Will your speech be online? That's my question.
Let's get one more here. Then you can.
Yeah, thank you very much for the enlightenment, the research work, and the information. Was credible indeed. I'm Michael from Nigeria. I still want you to throw more light on the way forward of demonetization and distillation and democratization, because you make a lot of illustrations, which was excellent indeed. What are the way forward of all those narratives? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello. Do we have a question here? Mike. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Prince Papa, and I'm a common, come from Kenya. And I would like the following issues to be addressed. That while registering for this conference, I had to be subjected to $30 as a member of IASC, $200 to participate in the conference, and as a commoner, as a common. In this country, $200 is a salary of someone, of a common in this country. And several people from across the African conference, and this was convened under the commons we want. I'm not a common that will fall under that category. In 1972, I would quote Edmund Burke, who stated that society is indeed a contract between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. The majority of the people in this country, out of the registration fee to attend this conference, is not about the commons themselves. It's about the few people with big pockets to attend this. Now we have, where are we the commons if we are talking about it? How can we reclaim the commons of the commons when the commons are not there? Is it a disparity in ideologies? Or is it a digress from the real commons? Is it the privatization of the ideologies? Is it thievery? Or is the uncommons of the uncommon we want? Thank you.
Okay. Over here, please. Do you have a question here so that they can handle the four of them, please? Back at the back, please. Somebody at the back.
Thank you very much. I wanted to know, to what extent is the process that you're describing a process of potentially falling faster and falling deeper, in the sense that these spaces, as they continue to be enclosed, and we're striving to find the commons that are disappearing and being recreated, but they're sort of smaller and more illicit. And how do we deal with that process without becoming some sort of criminal voyeurs or poverty voyeurs or some sort of strange mix? And I'm sort of conflicted about that. Thank you.
Thank you very. Okay, thank you very much. You decide how you. Yeah. One can do two there. Okay.
Thank you so much. I don't know if this recording will be online. I think it will be. I'm not sure. If it's not, we'll just take our talking notes and put them online. Michael, you ask what's the way forward. But I suppose the way forward for the commons is not something that we are prescribing here. We're saying something about the role of scholars, yeah? And the role of scholars in complex changing social realities. But I think that the answers are around us if we look. If we look, the way forward is happening. It's happening with or without the support of scholars. But in many ways, I think it is happening with the support of scholars. I think that moves back against commodification of nature are happening. Their claims to food sovereignty, their land occupation movements, there are claims, there are responses to the ways in which climate mitigation policies are aggravating some of these dynamics. And I see in many parts of Africa, many of the big social movements that arose in the face of the past waves of commodification in the 1980s from structural adjustment, the Washington Consensus, WTO in the 1990s. This was a period of the proliferation of social movements, actually the decline of the formal trade union movement, but the growth of the many, many other forms of social movements and public organization that has led to a very vast and rich world of society outside of electoral politics, outside of trade union organization. These are spaces that exist where people are contesting this. Are we there? That's the question. And I think that in part, Prince, you ask the point about how even a conference about the commons is commodified. I mean, let's be fair, also it takes money to organize a conference, and much as we would love to have a commons for our national airlines, that didn't work very well. So many things take money, but I think that the question, rather than asking, for instance, the organizers of the conference, we should all be asking ourselves, somehow an institution or something enabled us to be here. What are we going to do to socialize the messages and the learning that we've had here outside? And that is not the responsibility of the organizers. It's a collective one, in my view. I mean, from our side, what will we do? Radio interviews? Put out all of our papers? Try to make sure that we publish open access, or at least put out open versions of paywalled journal articles? And I think that responsibility, in a sense, you kind of answered yourself, which is that we have a responsibility. I'm going to leave it to Moenieba. I didn't get your name at the back. She's going to answer you on this issue of criminal voyeurs.
Falling faster and deeper. Yes, I don't think he mentioned his name. I think you're right. It is about you're conflicted, and it is very uncomfortable. But I think it is also important that why we raise it is that we also need to think together. And it is not only about thinking and concepts, it's also about support and where that support can be. I think that we raise this because there are people, poor people, most vulnerable people who cannot cross the border from Zimbabwe to South Africa, and they risk their lives crossing the border. And people risk lives crossing fences in Isimangaliso and risk being shot at, killed at, and that is what has happened. And we often have to also think of that, and this is what I'm constantly thinking, the violence that had been used against people, of dispossessing them from land, rights, livelihoods, and culture. That has been incredibly violent. So I think we also need to put that in context, but it is food for thought, and I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you, but to tell you that we just wanted to make you uncomfortable and to think about these things as we also think about it.
Thank you very much. Let's get, we have online participants. Let's check whether there is a question online. Is there one? Hello? Hello? Somebody is speaking.
Can't hear.
Huh? Yeah, I need to put them on. Hello?
Discussed offline, and I thank the speakers for challenging my own frameworks to rethink what we should be doing.
Okay. Francis, what did you say? Yeah. Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, it wasn't a question. It was thanks for challenging my own thinking and framework. And it's best that we discuss my question offline, as it has some complex concepts in it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Let's appreciate our presenters one more time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I will now.
We got them here to make noise. And thank you so much, Professor Kiruthi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's now time to move on to the next session. I will request my colleague, Dr. Kiteme, to take over and transition us to the next session, please. Dr. Kiteme.
We're getting there very soon. We would like to invite the president of the ISC to come to the podium. We had planned to take some few minutes to recognize the great effort that the Joint Organizing Committee put as a team to prepare for us to come and stay here for 1 full week. And please, I will ask you to bear with me so that we can take the next 5 minutes to do that. I had from this side an organizing committee of 7 persons representing different departments and institutes of the University of Nairobi and the CETRAD. Again, because of time, I would like to ask those 7 to stand up very quickly. Wherever you are seated. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as you're standing, if no one has told you this, please get it from me. You're a great team. Thank you very much. That team was supported by another team of uncountable support individuals. And please, if you were in that team of the Secretariat, kindly stand up wherever you are seated. The Secretariat, you know yourselves. There is somebody who is still seated when the others are standing. Please stand. Yes. There is a team at the corner there with the Francis, with the friend, and the entire, media, social media, and the IT, and a magic lady here called Lillian, and another one who has just disappeared. There was a time Lillian wrote to me an email at 3:20 in the morning, and I was only lucky to have been sitting for other reasons, and I responded. And I was wondering, is this lady sleeping, or she's just throughout responding to mails? Thank you so much, Lillian. I'm sure all of you have read an email from Lillian. We had a very, very strong support from the protocol team, the leadership of Ellen and Stacy, exceptional, wonderful support of the IT, under the leadership of Francis and James. These are the other 2 guys. I wasn't sure how it would work with IT. Thank you so much for proving me wrong. I was thinking when we go back to our office, I couldn't open a kiosk for James because I did not know he had this skill of handling, so many people at the same time with extremely complicated questions. Thank you so much, team. If I've not mentioned you, please just know that your part was the most important in the entire process. Thank you so much.
Can I close with one thing? Can I add one point?
Yes, please. There's Mr. President interrupting me. I will accept for that. But I still have Tobias, the other person.
Okay, can I wrap up what you just did?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we've often heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, watching this, I've learned it takes a village to run a conference. And for all those people that just stood up, I'd like to ask you to stand up one more time, just to get recognition. Could you please, everyone from the two teams? Backstage, we were thinking we might bring everyone up here. There are 28 plaques that read, "The International Association for the Study of the Commons recognizes," put your name here, okay, "for exceptional service in organizing the IASC Biennial General Conference in Nairobi, Kenya, presented with gratitude at the conference closing session." So you each have one. When we finish this, please come back and let's get a group picture with them, okay? They're back behind. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sabine Beer, your team, please.
Okay, so there is more diplomas and more mentioning of people who have been behind the scenes and who have made this conference work. So I would like to invite the former IASC president, Insar Teesveld, and Jessica Steinberg, director of the program on environment and natural resource governance at the Indiana University workshop, to come to the stage.
Go ahead and do what you were about to say.
Okay, we're trying to follow the program. So, dear members, I'm really happy to see how so many new members this evening here today. And I know that you struggle hard to understand, first of all, what the ISC is. And now I will take just 3 minutes to introduce you also what the workshop is, what we usually call like this. So, that's the Ostrom workshop in Bloomington at the Indiana University. It started off, the ISC, actually all its history started there with a commons property network that was founded in 1984. In 1989, a group of already at that time very interdisciplinary scholars founded the at that time called International Association for the Study of Common Property. It was led by Lynn Ostrom, who also became her first president from 1990 to 1981. In 2006, a bit later, the members of the association decided to drop the P and call it what we know today, the International Association for the Study of the Commons. Actually, we are still registered in Bloomington as a non-profit organization, and that's also where we need to hand in our tax report. And most of you, I'm sure, have engaged with the Ostroms in one or the other way over the past. The workshop, the Ostrom founded it in 1973, and they called it on purpose a workshop and not an institute and not a center, because they really wanted to keep the spirit of working together like craftsmanship, having a good home of interaction and intellectually debate and coming up with not finalized work, so really critical interaction, and that's why they called it a workshop. It's still a place where people come and talk and critically discuss. So the initial secretariat of the ISC has also been situated at the workshop in Indiana before it moved to New York, from there to Mexico, from there to Utrecht in Europe, and now in Arizona, where we have Karen, our executive director, And most of them might have emailed to her in order to get you all here. Thanks, Karen. I think some of us would still call the Ostrom workshop our intellectual home. And when the Ostroms passed away, it was a bit critical to keep track of the two lines of the ISC that continued to move in one direction as a scholarly and a practitioner organization. And let's call it the workshop did some interesting pathways in different ways until it was strongly advised to bring the Ostroms back into the Ostrom workshop. One result of that was that the Commons Governance Program was re-established, which I had the pleasure to lead from 2021 to 2022. Some of you might know this has been also my second year of being a president at the ISC. What a likely coincidence. So part of my work there really was to re-establish the strong links to the Ostrom workshop. So having said this, I just want to give you a few ideas what the big advantage for ISC members is that we established this union. You can affiliate yourself very easily with a working group that is hosted at the Ostrom workshop. Also, for all our ECN members here, you may have noticed it's quite easy for you to get access to the Ostrom Workshop Summer Academy. I would also like to draw your attention to the Digital Library of the Commons, which is hosted in Bloomington and which is still a huge asset for all of us, hosting all the old conference papers of the past. So be aware and check that out. Please also apply as a visiting or scholar and in the practitioner program, so you're very welcome to hand your applications in. And as you reminded me, also the weekly seminars are easy for us to follow once you lined up and signed in so that you can follow them. The other way around, Ostrom Fellows and Ostrom's awardees get a free access as ISC members, so that's also a way how we can link up. Finally, the ISC has a seat in one of the governance bodies of the workshop so that we will not go off different routes in the future. We exchange information of both newsletters that come up one week and the other. And we also do careful planning of big events we host, and that's why Jess is at my side here. So you may have noticed that I mentioned that the Ostrom workshop has been founded in 1973, and if you can good calculate, that's exactly 50 years ago. So with this evening and with this conference here, we kick off the 50th anniversary of the Ostrom workshop, and Jesse will tell you where it will all ends up to.
Thank you, Inza, and I just want to highlight that Inza really is sort of the personification of the relationship between the Ostrom workshop and IASC, and was such a joy and pleasure to have her in Bloomington. So thank you all for being here. As Inza said, and I think as Charlie said, I am a program director at the Ostrom Workshop. I direct the Environment and Natural Resource Governance Program. And I am also a co-chair with my esteemed colleague Edu Brandizio, who is also at Indiana University, of the Workshop on the Workshop, the 7th occurrence of a large conference that we host in Bloomington, Indiana. This conference has been occurring every 5 years since 1994, and it's really kind of a family reunion of sorts for members of the Ostrom community near and far, scholars, alumni, practitioners that have had some interaction with their work or the workshop itself. And it's an opportunity to present research and to welcome new family members. So whether you are someone who has already engaged with the workshop or this is the first you're hearing of it, we would love for you to apply to present your work at the workshop on the workshop, which will occur in almost exactly 1 year from today, June 19th in 2024. We have a wonderful theme this year. It's the Commons, Polycentricity and Democracy, building on 50 years of Ostrom governance research, which really highlights the challenges of managing public goods and commons and our shared goal time of accelerated and conflicting social, environmental, and political challenges. So we really invite you to submit a paper or a panel, or to simply, or to attend even when we are, the call is already open. We are receiving panels and paper submissions until October 1st. We will respond to you shortly, me and Edu, soon thereafter with responses. I will be happy to answer any questions offline that you may have about the workshop on the workshop. It's really a wonderful opportunity to sort of either re-engage with the Ostrom family or to join it for the first time. So we invite you to join us in Bloomington exactly 1 year from today, and to submit your wonderful work, whether it is directly related to commons or more broad institutional analysis or governance questions. We would love to have you there. And I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
I'm very cognizant of time and knowing that we're going to have fun with music and dinner, so this is going to be quick just as I wrap up the session. But as I said in the opening, the pandemic wasn't easy for anyone. It wasn't easy for IASC. It wasn't easy for these conference designers to plan for something when we didn't know what it was going to be like today. Fortunately, we got here, and thanks to you all, we've pulled this off. I just want to highlight, INZA had the lucky opportunity to lead an organization during a pandemic, and it was not easy. And so INZA, on behalf of the IASC, this award is presented to you in recognition of your exceptional service and outstanding achievements as IASC president for your 2-year period. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
It has been a pleasure, even so.
So, okay, we have only 2 more important things to do before we break, okay? So I'd like to invite Tom Kuntz and Kiran Singh to the stage. A tradition going back, I can't even remember how long, has been at the end of this conference to award the Ostrom Award to a senior scholar and a practitioner in this case. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm going to introduce the awards, recognize the people who made these awards possible, announce the winners, and then give the winners the floor for a few remarks.
So the Ostrom Award was instituted in 2019 to honor the legacy of Elinor Ostrom. It's an opportunity to recognize those involved in developing, operating, and studying, in Ostrom's word, institutions that bring out the best in humans. It is also an opportunity to demonstrate what can be achieved when people work together in innovative ways to manage their commons or provide new insights through diligent scholarly research.
And on a personal note, I had the extremely good fortune to work with Lynn Ostrom as my PhD advisor a long time ago now. It wasn't 50 years, though. I can attest to her curiosity and her generosity and her desire to connect empirical research with theory and practical problem solving in the world. I actually currently teach an undergraduate course called The Tragedy of the Commons ? And in this, we delve into puzzles of the commons, and students find Lynn to be very inspirational, both as a pioneering thinker and as well as a human being. Lynn always sought to shine the spotlight of recognition on others, so in this spirit, we would like to recognize this year's award winners.
So Lynn's work and life have had a deep impact on my life and the work that I do at Foundation for Ecological Security. My long association with ISC as well as the Ostrom Award are very close to my heart. And I'm proud of the impact that we have been able to achieve in terms of highlighting the potential of commons and the criticality of community stewardship for sustenance of commons worldwide. Managing the award is an international community effort, so we'd like to first acknowledge all the support that we have gotten from different people from across the world. So first, we'd like to acknowledge the coordinators who served this year. John Powell, the past president of IASC and a research fellow at the Countryside and Community Research Institute at the University of Gloucestershire. Tom Coons, who's here with me, professor of environment policy at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and myself, Kiran Singh from Foundation for Ecological Security. We'd also like to thank Foundation for Ecological Security for the administrative support that it has extended to the award over the years. We'd also like to thank the Ostrom Award Committee of 2023, which includes Harini Nagend, Frank Van Leverhorn, Kate Ashbrook, Giuseppe Miserelli, and Ruth Menzendick. And last but not the least, we'd like to thank Karen, the Executive Director of IASC, who has attended to all our demands and all our questions and all our queries at any point in time. Thank you so much, Karen. We also want to thank the numerous nominators and evaluators, many of who are joining us today, for their time and thoughtfulness. This is truly an example of the collective action and the labor of love of Lynn's vision of the possibility of self-organization.
So I'm going to present the Scholar Award. This award recognizes an individual involved in common studies demonstrating extraordinary commitment to and impact on training and/or advising new generations of common scholars and/or practitioners. And this year's winner is Marco Jansen. So I'll tell you a little bit about Marco's work if you're not familiar. Working together with scholars from diverse disciplines, Dr. Jansen studies the conditions of self-governance of shared resources in the field, in the lab, in cyberspace, and even in outer space. Yes, that's right, outer space. Using behavioral experiments and computational models and case study comparisons, his work has contributed to methodological diversity in studying the governance of the commons and demonstrates the importance of a participatory process to derive sustainable outcomes. These insights are applied to using games as intervention tools, for example, for groundwater governance in India. You may have seen some of this project presented at a lot of panels here today. Marco has also helped to increase access to research outcomes via contributions to practices of open science, open access publishing, and virtual conferences. Unfortunately, Marco is not able to join us here today, but we would request that Ruth Menzendick, his colleague for many decades, will come up and accept the award on his behalf and just say a brief remark. And so I'd like to request Charlie to please do the honors to award the certificate to Ruth on Marco's behalf.
Thank you. I have the great honor of collaborating with Marco Jansen. And while I've been a great beneficiary of his generosity and knowledge, so have basically all of you. Because Marco, you've benefited from his contributions to scholarship. We all have on the Commons, for shepherding IASC through and like the organization of the global conference as a virtual event 2 years ago when we couldn't be here in person. I'm really sorry he isn't able to be here with us in person, but I will accept this on his behalf and convey it to Marco along with our thanks and great appreciation for his work. And for those of you who are somewhat new to the field, I'll put in a plug for, among his open access things, the book on sustaining the commons, which is open access and is an excellent introduction to the field and research tool for all of us. Thank you very much.
So the second award is the Practitioner Award. It recognizes individuals, communities, and groups involved in the restoration, protection, sustainable use, and management of common resources. This year, we had very strong submissions, and we are happy to announce that this year the winner is Seva Mandir. Seva Mandir's work across 50 years has emphasized on revitalization of ecological commons in Western India by strengthening relationship between the impoverished rural communities and their lands. The organization stresses on the use of democratic methods, including participatory decision-making. Grounded in Gandhian principles of dialogue and inclusiveness, the process champions collective good over self-interest. The work has regenerated pastures, sacred groves, and forests, and created carbon sinks and engendered sustainable livelihoods. Seva Mandir aspires to empower more communities to overcome fragmentation and find common ground and a purpose across broader geographies. I request Charlie to please award the certificate to Seva Mandir. I request Mr. Ajay Mehta, Trustee, Seva Mandir, and Mr. Ronak Shah, Executive Director, Seva Mandir, to please come on the stage and accept the award and share their experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. My legs are shivering, so probably I'm just going to read my speech today. Dear friends and guardians of commons, it's a great honor to accept this award today on behalf of communities of Udaipur and Seva Mandir family. Working on commons is close to the soul of Seva Mandir. And I want to thank all our donors, supporters, well-wishers, volunteers, and staff for their long commitment and contribution for this great purpose. More special thanks to the tribal communities, the indigenous groups, and the village communities with whom we have worked for over 5 decades. Those communities have deep connection with their lands, for their identity, for the security, their spiritual feelings, and for their livelihoods. I can say Seva Mandir's biggest contribution is to strengthen their relationship with their own lands. In last 3.5 decades, thousands of hectares of grazing lands, forests, and sacred groves have been restored by Seva Mandir. This ecological transformation is a result of sacrifices and courage of many individuals and groups. They gave up their encroachments on the commons and stood their grounds against the vested interest from their own communities as well as from outside. And all this was done by the non-violent means of the Gandhian tradition of satyagraha, constructive work, and truth. Today we have a great confidence to claim that local communities not only build ecological commons, but the commons of local self-governance. Communities showed that they can move from self-interest to collective good, from despair to hope, and from fragmentation to collective action and self-critical reflection. The important message we want to give from this ecological movement is that commons are the foundation of strong communities and local democracy. Ostrom's legacy showed us the significance of the values of respect, togetherness, and common good. Her research encouraged the world to show faith in communities like in Udaipur. This award today is a reminder for the world to make such communities their partners, but also the torchbearers in conserving the old commons like the land, but also the new commons in front of us like the climate. We truly respect the recognition and appreciation you have given us today. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to add a few words to what Ronak has said. This award means a lot to Seva Mandir because it recognizes long years of work. It was fortuitous that Seva Mandir started to work on the commons. Its original objective was always to create local self-governance and deepen democracy. But we didn't make headway while we were doing adult education and agricultural extension work. But when we started to work on the commons, we discovered a pathway to greater local governments, greater democracy. And today I feel we are at the threshold of truly making a broad-based movement in that direction. And my primary purpose of saying something is to acknowledge the work of scholars and activists who actually shifted the needle of discourse in India from state-led forestry to a participatory approach to forestry. And it was that shift in the mid-80s that got Seva Mandir involved with the work on the commons. I also want to acknowledge state officials who responded to that advocacy. Had they not, at that point, created that space and talked about a people's movement to protect the environment, Seva Mandir may not have been able to address this problem. What is special about the commons is it is not only a pathway to greater democracy and local self-governance, it is equally a way to disempower people. And what has been very special, which Ronak referred to, is in India there was a tendency to privatize the commons, either legally or informally. And when we started to work on the commons, we found a way to overcome that barrier. So I would like to end by saying that it is really remarkable what IASC is doing, because I think the world of scholarship is really so important in terms of driving policy. And I also feel that the spirit of Elinor Ostrom in seeking modes of governance which are ethical and not power-centric is the pathway to at least democracy, not only in India, but the world over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll just take last 2-3 minutes to just show our movie, and thank you very much.
Tech people, I know you're working hard. Are you trying to get the sound right?
Big thanks to all the technicians. Thank you, Tech.
अलख जगावा में आया जल हीरे जीवन है रे भाया अलख जगावा में आया नहीं सोना है रे बाया अलख जगावा में आया वो नहीं सोना है रे बाया इसे बचाना ना भूलना अरे गाव गाव रा बाया रे सुन लो गाव गाव रा बाया रे सुन लो।
ये जो जंगल बाप दादा ने बिल्कुल नष्ट कर दिया था। मेरे घर में पापा मम्मी बहनें ये सब कोयले बेचते थे।
हमारा जब भी सरकारी कोई कर्मचारी आ जाता या पुलिस वाला आ जाता या कोई दूसरे लोग अगर पैंट पहन करके ऐसे कोई आ जाते थे, उस समय हमारे गांव से लोग देख करके भाग जाते थे जंगल में।
कॉमन का मतलब गांव की सामूहिक संपत्ति, तो ऐसी संपत्ति जिसमें पूरे गांव वालों का अधिकार है। गांव का तालाब है, इसमें पूरे गांव वालों का अधिकार है। गांव में चरागाह है तो उसमें घास काटने का, लकड़ी लाने का गरीब से गरीब व्यक्ति को भी उतना ही अधिकार है जितने संपन्न व्यक्ति को भी।
सेवा मंदिर की सोच है कि लोग अपने गांव में ग्राम स्वराज हासिल कर सके और उसके लिए सेवा मंदिर गांव के लोगों को तैयार करता है ताकि वो एक जाजम पे बैठ के अपने सारे मुद्दों पे बात करें और धीरे धीरे अपने विकास की जिम्मेदारी खुद ले सकें।
जाजम का कायदा साहब ये एक, चाहे आदिवासी हो, चाहे राजपूत हो, रेबारी हो, कोई भी हो, सभी एक ही जाजम होते हैं। अगर महिला अलग बैठेगी, अपन अलग बैठेंगे तो फिर अपना काम वो नहीं होगा। तो फिर हमने एक ही जाजम पर बैठना शुरू किया।
ज़्यादातर सेवा मंदिर कोशिश करती है कि सामूहिक जमीन पे काम करे। व्यक्तिगत काम करते हैं तो 1-2 परिवारों को, 5 परिवारों को फ़ायदा होता है, पर सामूहिकता में पूरे गांव को फ़ायदा होता है।
150 हेक्टेयर पे हमने काम कर लिया तो एक बड़े लेवल पे ज़मीन पे काम हुआ तो उससे पानी का भी हमारे एरिया में रुक गया।
सामुदायिक वन अधिकार तो 2006 में आया है। उससे पहले हमने सन 1985 से इस जंगल के प्रति हमने पूरा संघर्ष किया है। अभी हमारे को 1100 हेक्टेयर का सामुदायिक वन अधिकार मिल चुका है हमारे गांव को।
पास पड़ोस के लोग जो कब्जा करके बैठ जाते हैं तो हमने उनको हमने नहीं करने दिया, उसको रोक दिया।
इस सत्याग्रह में सर हमने मीटिंगें की बाहर फिर यो करे अपने बाहर से अपने ख़राब हो जाएंगे, अपने यो करे तो लोग नहीं आते, वो भी आए सर, आए तो इसमें हमारा महिला का पूरा रोल रहा।
और फिर हमने तय किया जेल जाने के लिए तैयार है, लेकिन हम जाएंगे, काटेंगे बांस को।
परंपरा से हम प्रकृति की पूजा करने वाले हैं तो हम भगवान की हमेशा पूजा करते आए हैं और विश्वास करते आए हैं। जहाँ पे हमने कैसे काटने दूंगा, नहीं किसी को काटने दूंगा।
तो पहुँच गए। इतने लोगों ने इस बात को समझ लिया कि उनको उनकी ज़मीनों को बचाना क्यों ज़रूरी है। साथ में आज की ज़रूरत ये है कि इसे पूरे देश में कैसे फैलाया जाए ताकि एक कॉमन समझ बने कि इन जंगलों को किस तरह
And just to let you know, that video will be on the Seva Mandir YouTube. It already is. And also the Ostrom Award website will have that video, plus a few other videos from the other finalists. So you can check that out there. So before we wrap up this portion, I just wanted to make a note. This award's been going since 2013, so some of the past awardees are with us here today. I wanted to thank everyone here for attending, of course, and also those who served as nominators or evaluators for the award committee, and also the IASC and the Foundation for Ecological Security. Those folks I just mentioned on the award committee and also those who are past winners, we invite you to join us and sit together at the dinner table. There's going to be a table by the stairs where Kieran and I and other folks are going to be. So we hope to try to help have some conversation with that group of people. So when we head to dinner, please look for myself or Kieran. It's by the stairwell. There's going to be 1 or 2 tables for that. So that's all we have for now. Thanks for your attention, and let's congratulate the winners once again.
So we're almost through.
You remember me, right? Intern at Zetrad for Master of Ceremony, and similar tasks. So at the very beginning, when this conference was just a fantasy, it was a fantasy in someone's brain, someone with a big brain, I can assure you. So Tobias, he had the idea of this conference. He dreamt of doing it in Africa, in Nairobi, building on a long-standing partnership that the University of Bern has with CETRAD and with partners from the University of Nairobi. He was dreaming of a face-to-face conference in a time when no one was allowed to make face-to-face conferences. And I'm very happy that we were able to make his dream come true. And even though he has a very big brain, he couldn't do it all by himself, so he has this wonderful team that helped him to do this. You've all emailed with them, you've all had their support. I would like them to stand up as well. So first of all, Ariane, who has put together the entire program. And there was Jana Lamach, who supported her and then slowly took over, because Ariane had to get back to her field work, and I can assure you these two, their PhDs will be delayed by weeks, and it's because of the hard work they have done for their conference. So thank you very much for all the support, without which it could not have happened. Also, I would like to thank Stefanie Ramsayer, the secretary at the Institute of Social Anthropology at the University of Bern, who has also been working in the background and facilitating everything. So also a big applause to her. And then Adrian Argoyo and Martin Ritzmann, who have been the backup support for the IT team here, also coming from the University of Bern, to set up the whole hybrid facilitation of this conference, which it's basically like organizing two conferences, right? Because you have to do the online part and the face-to-face part. So thank you very much. And in the background of the Institute supporting this was Heinz-Peter Zneu. He has enabled all the resources from the Institute so that we could even do this. Thank you very much.
Yes, and so just like the other team, the Nairobi team, each one of you, maybe stand up one more time for a round of applause. Insert your name into the certificate. Backstage, we have the certificates framed for you to get, and after this, we should take a big picture of the two teams together. Boniface, you have one as well. Okay, so make sure you stay around. So the last thing I just want to say for my IASC, and again, my laptop is telling me to get off the stage. It's shut down. You're all now IASC members, and we're unbelievably grateful for you to make this journey here, take part in this. I hope you've rekindled new relationships and old relationships in this moment. And I hope you take this Nairobi conference as a baton to move into 2024 and continue to engage as a community. You all get the newsletters that Karen puts together. We are going to be announcing, we have 3 events already planned. One, perhaps one of the first practitioner trainings on a governance system called Sociocracy that'll happen in September. We have the Spaces Commons online conference that will be happening, and these are all online, by the way, happening in, I'm trying to remember, I think October, is that right, Karen? November. And then we have the World Commons Week event that'll be coming up in December. Finally, we have an event that's almost nearly approved. We still have a little tweaking to do, but I feel confident to talk about it. That is a side event adjacent to the WOW 7 that's on state reinforced self-governance and the institutional grammar and policy. So we've already got 4 2024 events planned. The last thing I'll just ask is that we want you to get creative, meet people that you want to work with, and come email me or email Karen, and let's get more events in 2024 online. We're ready to help you and support you. So with that, I'll close my section of the conference and bring it back to Boniface. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot more could be said, but time is not there. So may I kindly ask you to put your hands together to invite our Vice Chancellor, Professor Stephen Ikiyama, to give us the closing remarks. Professor.
Yes, very well. I was here at the beginning of the conference and shared a few experiences of my own. Now it is just for me to give the final remarks as this conference is coming to an end. So I will try to stick to the script. I want to acknowledge all those who have been acknowledged here before, the organizing committee, as well as the president, Charles Schweik, for the work that you have done. You have made the University of Nairobi very proud. And I believe all of us. I'm happy to join you yet again during this conference. For the last couple of days, I believe that we have now achieved a better understanding of the challenges facing the commons, a clearer vision of the commons we want to work towards, and the roadmap to get us there. By emphasizing the principles of equity and sustainability, this conference leaves no doubt that more thoughtful use of shared natural opportunity to congratulate all the participants for their contribution to these crucial that we are seeking to improve. We have all been challenged to re-examine the philosophies underlying our actions when it comes to the commons. In addition to bringing new thinking, the conference has cast doubts on what we thought had been figured out already. One would say that we are back to the drawing board to think about new issues. This is what knowledge development is all about. But even as we seek it, we should remember to bring on board other actors so as to further expand the conversation beyond the limb of academia. For the university's community, this conference has offered opportunities for mentorship for the PhD candidates as they continue to refine their work. I would like to send them my best wishes for the remaining phase of the academic journey. For all the researchers present here, I congratulate you for the work you are doing. I hope that the networks you have established during this conference will be useful in advancing your interests and those of your institutions. This conference, I'm pleased to note, has indeed strengthened the ties between University of Nairobi and the University of Bern and the respective departments that worked towards in co-hosting the conference. I look forward to working together in other areas. I'm also glad to say that the University of Nairobi is for us to plan and host this conference. We thank you and look forward to partnering with you in the future beyond the commons. I want to conclude by thanking the IASC Executive Committee for giving us the opportunity to host the 2023 IASC at the University of Nairobi. We thank you for your warm interactions and immense support in putting everything together. I thank all the delegates for their warmth and hope that you will continue to enjoy the beautiful hospitality and the scenes in this country, Kenya. I wish you all a safe journey home and hope that you will get another opportunity to visit Kenya and University of Nairobi in particular. Go well. God bless you.
We thank you so much. It's not yet. Please don't leave. We have very important announcements to make. And if you left before listening, then you may have some challenges tomorrow. The conference is not closed. Tomorrow we have full-day panels and presentations taking place. Please consult your program so that you decide which panel you may want to participate in. 2, you will all exit through these 2 corridors and make sure before you move out at the Secretariat room, you will get a dinner voucher. Do not disappoint yourself, because if you don't have that voucher, you will not be allowed inside there. And finally, those of you participating in the post-conference field excursions, please visit the website. There is information posted since Wednesday informing you of the time of departure and where we are departing from. So there's somebody staying in the 4 Points. Please remember to collect your key, otherwise you may as well prepare to sleep outside. May I request the IT team to play for us the national anthem as we close this session, and from the bottom of my heart to all of you, thank you so much. Huh? Wait. You will just remain there. You'll be organized for a group photo as we exit. Ellen, please.
Thank you very much and good evening. This will take us just 2 minutes. I would like us to occupy these 2 rows in the middle. Our Vice Chancellor, you'll remain where you are. And then some of us will take the staircase, line up along the staircases, and then the photographer will take a big, nice group photo for all of us. Thank you very much, and do have a good evening.